August the 7th of 75. I was driving in a pickup truck with my wife and my dog. And there come a ball of light in a pickup truck. And it really frightened me. It was about the size of a basketball. And I was looking for a place to pull over the pickup, and that light spoke and said, "Now, peace. You don't have to be afraid of me. Fear not." And that ball of light started speaking to me and said that they would perfect abortion from one place to another. And they would perfect abortion as they did in the Old Testament. And he told me the many different things that they'd perfect in abortion. Like the saline solution is like throwing your baby into the arms of a red-hot idol, Malak. And another is where they partial birth abortion, where they just pull the baby apart. In the Old Testament, they did just that and ate them. And so he was saying that I'll begin to judge when they release an abortion pill in the world. And my judgments will begin to fall. And then he began to speak to me and said, homosexuality is going to come out of the closet. It'll demonstrate in your streets, and it'll demonstrate in your government. And there'll be a homosexual disease that comes forth that cannot be cured. And by the year 2000, it'll be killing $5 million people a year. And it'll increase and increase until that sin is repented of. And he said, tell the people, if you don't want part of this judgment, then don't be a part of this sin. And then he said in the last days, they would begin to mix two cheap chemicals together. They would make a huge drug that would literally destroy a person's conscience, but they wouldn't even be convicted anymore. That was the meth labs. And he said that it would be so pressured in the time that things change that the government of the United States would give free drugs to calm people down. That's the only thing that hadn't happened yet. But I believe we were right on the verge of it. So I got home and unpacked, and a demon appeared to me and said, if you tell anybody that prophecy, I'll kill you. I'll go on doing the thing you are, praying for the sick and all those things, I'll leave you alone. But if you tell them that prophecy, I will kill you. And I told him, I'm not your property anymore, I'm not afraid of you. So, on August 8th of 75, I had some calls over the phone that wanted me to give what I just got in that revelation about what would begin to take place from that time forward. So I spoke to him, and then I went to work with my son. I was doing tree service, and I got out in about 30 minutes. Pain hit me in the lower body. It was terrible. I mean, my lower body began to get as hard as rock from my waist down. And I asked my son to get me home. So he drove me home, and they took me to the doctor. The doctor said, I've never really seen this before, but this is really critical. You better get him in the hospital right away. And I said, no, I'm going to die. I'll die in my own bed. So he gave me some pain pills and went home. And I took one. It didn't didn't stop the pain. That pain was horrible. I took a second one, didn't stop the pain. I took a third one. When I took the third one, no sooner got it down and blood began to shoot out of my mouth like a geyser. And I could see some of the pain pills had never dissolved. So I got a wet towel wrapped around my head. I think, man, this is serious. And the pain, and I would have screamed if it would have helped any, but I was really too weak to do that. And I was laying there, and all of a sudden the pain was over. And I went from that bed, I went to a tunnel. And I looked out of the tunnel, and there was beautiful light on down the road. And I looked to my side, and there was a man dressed in white. And I've never seen his face, but he was there, and he was walking beside me. And I'm thinking, I think I'm dead. And my second thought was, I come out of deep sin. I wonder if my robe's clean. And the man spoke to me and said, you can see now, Bob, look. And I looked, and my robe didn't have any spots on it. And I'm thinking, I'm going home to the Lord without any spots on my robe. Now this is the greatest day I ever lived. This stuff is over. And I started walking with this man in white. So we walked to where that beautiful white light was. There was white light and white light. And that which in the center had the shape of a man in it was the most beautiful of all white light. It is all white light. And he had his arms out. And he was greeting people. And I stepped out of that cave, and all of a sudden, there was light that just surrounded me, all around me. And I felt the best that I'd ever felt in my life. And I asked the man in white light, what is this? And he said, it's the glory of God. And I said, oh, that's so wonderful. I feel so loved. I feel so connected. And he said, yeah, it's the love of God. I said, how can it be both? The glory and love. Well, it's John 17. And it's like I was wrapped up in the cocoon of the anointing. And I felt so, if you multiply all the good feelings I'd ever had on earth 1,000 times, you still wouldn't touch it. So I started walking on closer to that great white light. And in the center of that white light, the man, the only thing that wasn't white was his eyes. And they were total blue. And they were like two wells. You couldn't see the bottom of them. But it was like two wells with light in them, but you could never see the bottom. But he put his hand out in front of him and said, no, I want you to go back. And he said, the enemy kills you before your time. I want you to go back. And I told him, I don't want to go back. I wasn't doing any good in the first place. He said, you're a liar, because you quoted my word. My word always does good. I said, but it's real painful back here. I mean, I've suffered persecution, and it was terrible. And he said, well, you're sort of cowardly too, but you have a love for souls, and that's why I moved on you the way I did. I want you to go back, but if you don't want to, I want you to look at this line over here. And if you can look at them and still want to come home, I'll take you home. I looked at that line, and that old Baptist in me sort of rose up and said, I'd go back for one soul, Lord. He said, I don't want you going back for one soul. I want you going back for 1 billion youth. And I want you to go back and touch the leaders, because I'm going to honor myself in one of the greatest awakenings of all time. there'll be over 6 billion people on the earth at the time I'm speaking of, which is now. And I'm going to bring youth in from every place without number. And they're going to need leaders to bring them in. And I said, I'll go back for that. I mean, look at that line. It was one of the most horrible things I've ever seen. And so, all of a sudden, I was back. And I was looking down at my body. And that bloody towel was still around my face. And I looked and there was 2 huge angels. Back in '83, I'd give Mike a word on several things I'd given him. And one was that the Truman Farm will be given to you. And all of its land. Well, they didn't believe it. But 2 years ago they believed it. And I'm sure you now know that it belongs to IHOP. And it will probably be the biggest house of prayer in the world. And it'll hold more than 5,000 youth, all of them dedicated in prayer. So, at 3 o'clock in the evening, on July the 3rd, I was sitting on my back porch, and the Lord entered in His presence, and sat down at a table. Then He showed me the golden ark, the glory of God, and I saw 35 people had a hold of the ark, was lifting it up. And I asked him, can I put my hand to it? And he said, no. No, these will be leaders. You are what you'll always be. You're not going to be anything else but what you are. But you bring the message that I'm preparing these men to come in and to bring the glory of God in an apostolic order, and to bring it in through the Isaiah 35, the higher way, the highway of holiness. From that time forth, He began to prepare people. I think some of the people that He was calling to be were like newborn babes. But I believe that they are getting ready to reach that 30 now in maturity. And when they do, you'll see the glory. So this began 27 years ago. I saw some things concerning China, the land of China, not Formosa, but China. And I saw that they would be a wave among young people there. And they would be able to see what was going on in the United States with wristwatches, which would begin to show that. And one of the greatest waves would come out of Russia and China. And that China would be greatly impacted by Christians, and that their technology would greatly increase, which it has, and that the word would go out through all China, and it would go out through like wristwatches or phones that had pictures on them, and nobody could understand what we were actually seeing at that time. But that I believe is impacting China a lot more than people realize. And I have saw one of the greatest awakenings of all time taking place there, especially in Russia. And youth coming to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And they become like a youth army that wasn't afraid of dying. And that they would actually raise up in China. At that time, nobody could understand it. Nobody believed it. I did because I saw it. And I was told to keep the white horse in the middle of the stream, because they would come mad dogs to both sides of the bank of people that were religious, legalistic, and they would want to bite the white horse, for they were literally mad, and they wanted to control the white horse. My job was to keep the white horse in the middle of the stream to where the mad dogs couldn't get to her. For you see, mad dogs can't cross water. They can't cross into the spirit man. And so a mad dog will lay down on the banks of the stream and die of thirst, because his throat's swollen too. And religious people will lay down right by it and die without ever getting into the water. So my job was to keep the white horse imbalanced and keep the flow continually coming to the white horse.